What's going on, everybody? Welcome back, Face Off Sports Network. I'm your host, Anthony Servino. Follow me on X at The Real NFL Guru. Follow the show at the FF Face Off and at fffaceoff.com. We can be found at all the top social media and podcast platforms. Back with me on a Football Monday, Pete Nova at Super Nova 38. We're going to bring you the latest NFL news and notes heading into training camp. We're going to go over our top 12 tight end rankings and tiers. A lot going on. Pete, what's going on?
Yeah, not much. It's a Monday. It's just started raining out here, but nothing makes me more happy to spend my Mondays at the end of the day seeing your face and hearing everything that you everything great that you have to say on the show. So
that's nice. Nice of you to say. Let's get right into it because camp's opening up. And the news is going to be flowing. And there's a lot of it to go over already. So let's start. Where do you want to start today? Let's start with first, I want to get my stupid sound drop. That's a good start.
Yeah, that's a good call.
So the big news out of Green Bay, Jordan Love is expected to be close to a deal with the Green Bay Packers, but he is not going to practice until it is signed. This isn't a holdout, but I think he's just being cautious to where, hey, they're really close to a deal, and I don't want to go out there and tear my knee and then cost myself money. So it seems like this is close. This is being reported from multiple NFL insiders and our guy, Pretty Ricky.
Yeah.
And I think Ricky was on it first. Let's be honest.
He was. I know he tweeted about it a couple days ago saying that there was a good chance that a deal was going to get done. I think it's going to get done pretty soon. It's only a matter of time. It's probably just working out the numbers and getting it figured out.
So, number one, and I'll start here. It's a quarterback league. The quarterback market, we see like Daniel Jones got $40 million a year, and I think that was overpaying for Daniel Jones. We just saw Trevor Lawrence get paid. These guys are going to get paid, deserve it or not. We've seen one nice year out of Jordan Love. Won a playoff game, put up really nice stats. I think it is too early to pay Jordan Love. If I'm Green Bay, I want to see it one more year. And I get it. You want to get ahead of the market a little bit. We see this from a lot of teams. But what if Jordan Love falls on his face this year? Look at Trevor Lawrence essentially in his year two under Doug Peterson. It wasn't good. He still got paid. But I don't know. Like, Pete, what do you think? Like, I feel like it's too early for Jordan Love. And they're saying he could be the highest paid quarterback.
Look, he's going to be a free agent after this season, so I can understand. I mean, unless they're going to go the tag route, go the tag route next year and then sign him, kind of thing. I can understand wanting to get their guy, whether we believe it or not. This is a team that spent the first round pick on him years ago. He sat behind Aaron Rodgers, was given his opportunity, won a playoff game in Dallas against an awesome defense. So they believe in the guy and he's showed up. Was a shaky start to the beginning of the year. I think he threw 2 interceptions in his last 8 games and had over 14 touchdowns passing. If they're convicted that this is the guy, then I think it's a great idea to lock him up now. That's really where I stand. Us outside of the building, right, as fans and as viewers, right, it's a little harder for us to understand because it is such a small sample size, but Green Bay seems to be doubling down at this point. Aaron Rodgers is gone. They pretty much not pushed him out, but they said, you know what, like, let's just go to the contingency plan in Love, which was clearly the contingency plan all along when they spent the first round pick on him. And I don't hate locking him up now because there's contracts that are coming down the pipe. Tua Tagovailoa, Dak Prescott. If Jordan Love, if we think this is a playoff team and this team goes to the playoffs again this year and makes a run, I don't think Super Bowl contenders is in the cards. I think they need another year. But, now you're looking at an even more expensive contract for a guy that you've already pretty much pushed your chips in the middle of the table for. So I don't hate them trying to get it done, and I think it's something that they'll get done in the next few weeks. At the worst, the next few weeks. I think it's going to happen no later than the end of this week, to be honest with you.
Fantasy football wise, Jordan Love, um, going as a top 10 quarterback off the board. He is going behind guys like Dak, Jaden Daniels, and Jordan Love. And I'm using FFPC July ADP and in the Fantasy Pros FFPC contest. I think that's about right. Now, Jordan Love had a nice fantasy season last year, but the Packers threw more than they normally would for a LaFleur team. They prioritized the running back position in free agency, re-signing Dillon, bringing in Josh Jacobs, and they drafted Lloyd. This tells me that they want to not only reestablish the running game like they had under all those years with Aaron Rodgers, but this defense, I expect it to play better, which means fewer shootouts. So, like Jordan Love, I'm okay where he's going ADP wise. I'm just not taking a lot of them.
Yeah, and I'm totally okay with that. I think where Jordan Love is, you're not I'm not sitting back saying, "Oh, I can't wait to steal Jordan Love." Honestly, Dak Prescott and Jaden Daniels, he's smushed in between them for FFPC ADP, and I prefer Dak Prescott, and I don't mind taking a swing on Jaden Daniels. It really depends, right? Like, if it's between Jordan Love and Jaden Daniels, I'm basing that off of my team construction at that point, right? If I have a lot of high upside players that I've taken, like a Devon A. Chain, maybe a Malik Neighbors who could be boom or bust this year, like some high potentially volatile players. I'll probably want to grab a Jordan Love. If I have a lot of high floor players like a Devontae Adams, or like a Mike Evans, like we talked about, I might prefer a guy like Jaden Daniels at that cost, who's going right behind Love, because Jaden Daniels, we think, has a chance to have a lot of spike weeks, right? And so that's really how I look at Jordan Love. Um, it's really about, picking your poison at that point in the draft. But I warm up to him a little bit. But to Anthony's point, I don't think they're going to throw the ball nearly as much as people expect. And I do prefer a guy like Dak Prescott and Jaden Daniels in a vacuum if I'm drafting today.
And Dak is my breaking point. If I don't get one of those quarterbacks between like Josh Allen, who's the QB1 ADP wise, and Dak, like I draw a line where Daniels and Love, Purdy. I'll wait and go get guys like Justin Herbert, and Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers later. Like I'm probably not going to grab any of those like middling guys like Love, Daniels, Purdy, Goff, Caleb, Tua, Lawrence. I'm not going to have a lot of them.
Yeah. Well, and the craziest thing is, and I saw a statistic earlier today, and it even makes me think about like Tua, right? I believe it was Frank Amarante on Twitter who said the Dolphins scored 27 rushing touchdowns last season, which was tied for the most in the NFL. If we get some sort of regression there, Tua has a chance to go up. Last year he was 16.7 fantasy points per game, right? Like, there's and that was quarterback 17. Like, you give Tua a couple more passing touchdowns and he's breaking into that low end QB1 territory where you're taking a guy like Jordan Love anyway. And Tua is priced at, I don't know, quarterback. I think he's like quarterback 14, 15. So yeah, I'm with Anthony. Like, there's not a ton of upside at Jordan Love's price. I don't really think where he's being drafted, he's going to go much higher. But to my point before, I think he's a stability piece in an offense that you can probably expect to be in the top 10 this season in terms of just overall offense in general.
Let's go to a piece of news that broke, towards the evening last night. Cam Akers found himself a job, and it is with the Houston Texans. He signs on with Houston, joins a backfield with Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce. Pete, what was your initial reaction? How do you feel about this Cam Akers to Houston? I guess marriage deal, whatever.
Yeah, I think I must have fell asleep at the wheel. I saw the news today and I could honestly care less. I mean, I think the thing with Cam Akers, right, coming off a second torn
Mhm.
Achilles, don't we know of another running back who a lot of people seem to be pretty high on, that tore his Achilles twice now? It's escaping me. Who was
Foreman, right?
what? No,
Dante
well,
Foreman.
Donta Foreman was successful, right? I'm trying to think. There's another running back. It's escaping me, but if I remember, I'll circle back to it. But Achilles is much
Yeah,
worse than an ACL at this point. Like Nick Chubb, ACL, like unfortunate, but like you can come back
yeah,
from that and be strong. Achilles is all where you get your pop, and your burst. And once you tear that, like you're really never the same. Guys can get. I mean, I've seen a lot of the fantasy Twitter doctors out there, and guys can get, um, you know, guys can get back to that level of play, like 85 to 90% of what they were. Jamie said you're thinking of the Ravens running backs. I do find it funny. Maybe I'm not thinking of like Javonte Williams, but like take a guy like Gus Edwards, right? Who tore his I think it was his ACL, for a second time prior to last season, and then came in and scored 13 touchdowns. Obviously a completely different scenario, but like we've seen guys do it. Cam Akers isn't in that realm. He might not even make the team.
yeah.
I think the rookie that they drafted has a better shot. I think Damian Pierce has a better shot. I don't think Cam Akers. I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't make this team.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going here with Cam Akers. This is not a guarantee that this wasn't a long
Mm,
term deal. This wasn't a 2 year deal. He has to earn a roster spot. He passes the workout. That gets him a contract. That's your golden ticket to, hey, you can now practice with this team, and let's see if you can beat out anybody else on this depth chart right now. Dare Ngumbuale, Jawar Jordan, J.J. Taylor, British Brooks are the other running backs outside of the top three we mentioned.
yeah.
So listen, if he looks good, he's going to make the roster because, like, he in theory should beat out. He's more talented than Ogunbowale, and there's a couple other guys that we don't really know who they are yet. Cam Akers, 2 years removed from 9.5 fantasy points per game. He's flashed in his career, flashed a lot of good things. But again, when you are dealing with this Achilles injury, that's a big time red flag. And you might be talking about Marlon Mack, by the way.
No, I was thinking
No? All
Jamie
right.
had it right. I was thinking J.K. Dobbins. Like there have
Oh,
been
all right.
people that talked a lot all this offseason and have talked about J.K.
Okay.
Dobbins, and I know goes to the Chargers. He's got an opportunity, but like I mean, what's the difference? Dobbins is 25. Cam Akers is both. They're both young. I was talking about Dobbins. I couldn't think of it.
Even last year with the Vikings, flashed a little bit, right? Like he had a couple of solid games, but he just didn't look like the same player. So again, this does not. And let's segue right now. What I'm going to say here is not going to affect Joe Mixon, and I do want to talk about Joe Mixon because there is a little bit of Mixon news to report. Nothing significant, nothing bad, and I'm pulling it up right now. Texans OC Bobby Slowick told the press that Mixon is an absolute workhorse in every regard. And this is how I feel about Joe Mixon. He's 27 going into his age 28 season. He's not sexy, but he's reliable. He can do everything right. Um, this is a significant upgrade when it comes to Joe Mixon to Devin Singletary and Damian Pierce. And outside of whatever it's Akers or Pierce, outside of a change of pace role, this is every bit of Joe Mixon's backfield. And this is a big reason why I'm kind of down on CJ Stroud at his cost. This Texans team, year two in that D'Amico Ryans defense. A significant running back upgrade who can handle every down work and can catch the
Yeah.
ball. and can pop a little bit in between the tackles, this team's not going to they're not going to throw the ball as much as last year, and they didn't throw a lot last year. They were around middle of the pack in pass attempts and team pass plays per game. So I don't know what people see. I guess they see the weapons with C.J. Stroud, but C.J. Stroud only had one game last year where he threw more than 2 touchdowns. So there's a lot of red flags with Stroud, but I love Joe Mixon in this landing spot. So I love that what Slowick is saying. It just backs up what I think about Joe Mixon anyway.
Yeah, I actually thought about this because, and I think we're in the same wavelength when it comes to this offense. Like, defensive minded head coach, you can their defense got significantly better with a lot of the additions that they added in the front seven. Like, this is going to be a team that when they have a lead, they're going to want. They didn't have a good running back to lean on. I mean, Devin Singletary, okay, like, look, give the credit where credit's due. Like, he was solid for them last year, Devin Singletary. But to your point, like, Joe Mixon is a true 3-down back, and he's a veteran. Like, he's a veteran. Bobby Slowick, like, you can hear him talking about him. Like, he's a pro's pro. Mixon, like, he's done it for a really long time. My fear with Mixon, it's the same fear with Mike Evans. Like, these are guys that I haven't had much shares of the last few years because of fear of, like, oh, maybe this is the year they fall off, or they're getting up there in age, or I just don't love them for whatever reason. And then I fear that this will be the year I draft Joe Mixon and he will shit the bed and fall off. So I hope I'm wrong about that, because I do want some shares of Mixon, but yeah, I'm excited for Mixon. I think this is a good opportunity for him.
Yeah, Joe Mixon right now, one of my favorite running backs, going around his cost. Past, you really go back to 2018, RB9 in fantasy points per game. But 2020, he was averaging 16.6, but only played in 6 games. But if we go to the past 3 seasons where he played at least 15 games, he's given us at least 15.7 fantasy points and finished as a top 11 running back in fantasy points per game. 2 of those years, in 21 and 2022, he finished as a top 7 back in fantasy points per game. At least 9 touchdowns total in that period. Past 2 seasons, at least 52 receptions and 376 receiving yards. So, like, Joe Mixon's a very good running back, and I love this situation. I think it's a better offensive line when it comes to run blocking than Cincinnati as well. So I think both of us are in on Joe Mixon and don't really care about this Cam Akers signing, really.
No, don't care.
Some more news, and this is a fun one. This is one I'm kind of very excited to discuss. Rashid Shaheed, this is a player we don't talk about a lot. This is one of Steve D'Angelo's guys. Like, he loved Shaheed before I even knew who the guy was. And he turns out to be a very solid player. He signs a 1-year extension with the Saints, right around $5.5 million. Shaheed could be a player that nobody is drafting high, but I think he could potentially, I hate to throw the word league winner, but if the stars align, I love Rashid Shaheed. Like, I think he could drastically smash his ADP when it comes to his overall fantasy finish. No more Michael Thomas, right? Because Michael Thomas, as banged up as he's been, I think he played like 9 or 10 games last year. We obviously have to overcome Derek Carr. They just lost Ryan Ramczyk, their star center. This offensive line's a work in progress. But Rashid Shaheed, when he gets opportunities, he pops. Now, obviously, a better best ball target type of player, but I think he could drastically outperform his ADP if he takes that step forward.
Yeah, I feel that. I think it's going to really depend on this Kubiak offense, and what they want to do, right? I think, 46% snap share for Shaheed last year is really what concerns me the most.
But no more
It
Michael
lands
Thomas.
I know, but how many games was Michael Thomas even on the field for all of the games last season? I'd have to take a look. I don't
He played
remember.
At least 9 or 10.
Yeah, he had 23 catches for 448 last year, Michael Thomas. To your point, I think I think Shaheed's a good best ball player. He played in 10 games. Michael
I mean,
Thomas, I just took a look
Thomas,
for you.
477 snaps. So he was on the field.
Yeah, he was on the field. But I mean, again, Michael Thomas is a guy who's not even signed right now. Like
Right.
at this point in his career, like Shaheed, like you would hope would be able to beat out Michael Thomas, in my opinion. I know he was young, but he was going into year two. It wasn't like he was a rookie. He'd been there. But for all that said, I mean, 719 receiving yards, 15.6 yards per reception in 2022, 17.4 yards per reception. Like
Yep.
it's I mean, honestly, like you put a guy like this in like the Lions offense, like I think of like a Jamison Williams, right? Like
Mm.
similar skill sets where like they can burn you over the top, but like not like a move the chains kind of receiver, where they're gonna provide you pop. Like this is like the Jamison Williams, like a poor man's Jamison Williams, right? And it's just he's just playing in a worse offense. But you hope that Kubiak can get this offense right, because I don't know, with Derek Carr, I actually liked the signing last year with the Saints. As a Broncos fan, like, I can't sit here and say I loved Derek Carr. He had some decent games against us, but I was actually excited for what he could bring. I know that's a scary thing to say about Derek Carr, but like I thought he would be good there. But that offense was a joke. I don't
Yeah.
really understand. I don't know if it was all on Carr. I don't know if it was the play calling. Dennis Allen hasn't really shown me much as a head coach to make me believe that like he has the fortitude to lead the team. I mean, when Jameis Winston's sitting there in victory formation and then goes for it, I think it was like the last game of the season, and pretty
Yep.
much doesn't
Yep.
care what the coach has to say. Like that says a lot about you. So I don't want to put it too much on Carr, though he does deserve blame. But I think Kubiak and this offense will look a lot better, and he should benefit from it. I just worry about roster clogs. I know I never want to say somebody's not draftable. Everybody's draftable at cost, but I worry about guys like Shaheed where they're too good to drop, but not good enough to start every
Well,
week. And
that
that's why I prefer a guy like that in best ball.
yeah, that I have a lot of him in best ball. He also provides value in leagues where you get credit for kick and punt return
Yeah.
touchdowns, and there are some out there in best ball,
Yeah.
especially. He's also a guy like I'm good. I might have a few shares in the redraft high stakes leagues as well, just because again, being drafted just outside the top 100 last year, more of a full time player compared to his rookie season. He gave us 5 wide receiver 2 weeks, including
Mm,
3 wide receiver 1 weeks.
yeah.
So when he pops, he pops. Just a matter of, okay, no more Michael Thomas. You're probably going to be the guy in 2 wide sets. Look at the depth chart, guys like Cedric Wilson, A.T. Perry. Not a lot of competition. I think he could really earn himself some targets. And 23rd last year in route win rate, and 23rd in win rate versus man. So we know he has the speed to beat coverage as well. So I'm very bullish on this guy, despite the bad situation offensively, because it's bad. I just wanted to talk about him,
Yeah.
because we don't a lot, but like I feel like Steve is onto something with this guy. I don't know.
He's to your point, like even just hearing what you said, like perfect best ball player, like 2 wide receiver 1 finishes, 3 wide receiver 2 finishes.
Yeah.
Like that's a guy that at the cost that you're getting him at, like you'll have to expect, if you get points for kick return touchdowns, like that there's a benefit in that. I just worry about like he's a guy that like he's going to have a huge week in the first 5 weeks where he scores like 25 fantasy points.
Mhm.
And then you're like, I can't drop this guy. And then you never know when to start him. Right. Like, and I just worry like Chris Olave is a target hog. And
Yeah.
who knows what's going to happen with Alvin Kamara, right? I mean, but if if the offense is better, they push the ball down the field more, and Kamara, regresses or isn't getting those kinds of targets, then they got to go somewhere. And so Shaheed could benefit from it. I mean, 75 targets is not terrible in year 2 for a guy like him. His air yards were a thousand air yards. Like, that's pretty good. And I know you don't love air yards. We've had this conversation on the show, but 1,000 air yards ain't too bad, man.
No.
It's not bad.
So before we get into the tight end rankings, I do want to talk about one more piece of Saints news and rumors, and that is with Kendre Miller. Let me pull it up, and it's deep in my notes here. But the thing with Kendre Miller is Dennis Allen tells the press that he wants to see more consistency out of Kendre Miller. And the reason why this is important is because, guys like me and Jim Coventry in the RotoWire show, we both like Kendre Miller. We both think this is the year with Kamara aging, coming off a poor efficiency season, to us falling off, that Kendre Miller, who played a couple of nice games last year, really eats into the workload. And that cost Kendre Miller is pretty good. So digging into this, Allen, the head coach, says he sees burst and explosiveness and the ability to make people miss, but he later adds he wants to see it more often. Does this kind of tell you that there's an issue with Dennis Allen and Kendre Miller? Obviously not personal, but does Kendre Miller have a lot to prove to earn those touches that we think he's going to get? Because a report like this, hey, I need this guy to be more consistent. And I think the second part of that, more consistent before I trust him with my football. That's how I'm reading into this. And by the way, before you go, this is why I love doing these. Here's a news report. Here's our spin and how to apply it to fantasy, because that's my read on it. I don't know if Dennis Allen trusts Kendre Miller.
Yeah. Dennis Allen is a weird guy. I feel like he reminds me a little bit of Arthur Smith. He gives me Arthur Smith vibes a little bit, which is like, you never want to hear that. It's like saying bomb on an airplane. So like, I mean, you definitely don't want to hear that. Jared, I see your question. We'll get it in just a second here. Yeah, I like Kendre Miller. I think, he's a true 3-down back. And that's something that, like, for a guy like Dennis Allen, who's a defensive-minded head coach, I don't know how much trust he can have in Derek Carr after what happened last year. Carr was benched a few times for mid-game for Winston, I believe, or maybe it was injury. Taysom Hill has been on the field a couple of times, and Carr's been on the sidelines. So if there is a possibility for them to actually lean on a true running game, which is something Alvin Kamara hasn't been able to give this team. I mean, Alvin Kamara, for what it's worth, extremely talented athlete in his career, but I don't know the last time he topped 1,000 rushing yards. I really don't know. I'd have to actually look that up, because I think it's something I think between him and your boy Austin Eckler, I don't know. I don't even know if Alvin Kamara has had 1,000 rushing yards in his career in a season.
He's
never had.
He topped out at 932 once.
Yeah.
Everything else
last
under
year
900.
Yeah, last year, which is actually crazy, because Kamara's yards per attempt were 3.9, 4.0 the year before, 694 rushing yards from your starting running back, and Kamara only had 180 attempts. He missed a few games last year, but I don't know if Dennis Allen's truly a defensive-minded guy, like we talk about with the Texans, if Kendre Miller can just show that he's ready, there's a chance that he takes over this job. I think the problem with Kendre Miller is he dealt with some injuries last year, and he didn't start the season healthy. He had some injuries in camp, I believe, a hamstring. And I think once he got to the NFL, he just didn't look ready to go. The talent's there, but I worry. I still want my shares of Kendre Miller, but I think it's a true, if Kendre Miller wants this job, it's his. But it's a matter of, can he show that he's ready for a full RB1 workload? And I just don't know yet. I hope he is, though.
Yeah, other players going around Kendre Miller. Um, Guys like Ezekiel Elliott going a few spots before, I'm like, we know what his role is going to be in Dallas. He's going to catch passes, and he's going to be the goal line guy.
Yeah.
I feel like that's more clear cut. Marshawn Lloyd, who we were going to talk about, but we're cutting into time here. Marshawn Lloyd, there's beat writers out of Green Bay saying, hey, he's going to have an early role because he's because of his skill set as a pass catcher out of the backfield. That pushes him over A.J. Dillon, and that also cuts into Josh Jacobs' workload a little bit. So, there's other guys here that interest me more than Kendre Miller. And I have quite a few shares of him already, but I might pump the brakes on it a little bit until I see some more positive reports.
Sure.
But Pete, let's get into our tight end rankings and tiers.
Well, hang on one second, because Jared's here on Facebook, and
all right.
he said, "Hey guys, love the show." He's in a keeper league. He said we keep 5. Would you deal Chase or Jefferson for ETN and 2 first-round picks? He said 1 in 2024, 1 in 2025. I'm gonna just probably just say no, unless your running back room is extremely putrid and there's a lot of running backs that are going to be kept and you don't think you're going to be able to get anybody. I wouldn't deal Chase or Jefferson for ETN and a first this year and a first next year. Again, unless I'm wrong and every running back's going to be capped and you're pretty much sitting at like the David Montgomery zone where that's like your first run. Like I just, that's the only logic I can think as to why you would do a deal like that. But I'm holding on to my studs, and Chase and Jefferson are two guys that are great keepers if you can get them.
I would normally say no, but I just saw the ETN edition. That makes me a little bit more interested because you're getting 2 picks plus ETN. I don't hate it. And if I'm giving up somebody, it's probably Justin Jefferson because of the quarterback scenario. But I would, when it's all said and done, I think I'm with Pete here. I'd rather keep those 2 receivers. But if you really need the running back help, I guess you can do it. But I would rather keep, like, what you're getting with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. You don't know what those picks are going to turn out to be. Like, I'm not the greatest I win dynasty leagues, but I'm not a great like dynasty players probably hate me because I basically, if I can flip my pick for a veteran, like I've had drafts multiple times where I've had no rookie picks because I just deal them for players that can help me win this year. And I just keep flipping my roster with veterans that people don't want.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know where those picks are going to be. You don't know if they're going to be hits. You don't know if they're going to be misses. Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson are top 5 receivers in fantasy football.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so why don't we move on here to the next segment of the show? Yeah, so that's going to be our tight end tiers. I'll pull up the list here, and Anthony will bring us in. But essentially, and I just wanted to kind of make the point as to, we're a little ways out. Our tiers may change a little bit, but we want to provide something for guys or gals that happen to be drafting a little bit earlier now, and give you some tiers. The main benefit of tiers, right? And me and Anthony talk about this. You want to know where your tier breaks are because, it helps you when it comes to reaching on players and knowing, hey, like, there's say 4 or 5 wide receivers on the board that you really like, but there's only one guy left in your tight end 2 tier. You're going to want to lean on taking that last guy in that tier because there's a chance one of those wide receivers come back to you. So that's some of the thought process on why tiers are more important than ADP and rankings. Because it helps you provide, like, you might have 2 guys right next to each other in rankings, but you might see a significant tier drop between, one guy compared to the guy underneath him. And so it's important to have an idea of what your tiers are because it helps you navigate the draft a little bit better. So with all that being said, we're going to jump into our first tier here, tier one, and I'll let Anthony start on his two that he selected for this.
So my tier one, and it's totally against what I see from the consensus, but I will go with my two old men, Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. I think consensus they have, Laporta one, Andrews back a few spots. Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. Let's start with Travis Kelce. I believe we are getting him at a discount anytime he is not ranked as a tight end one. And plus, like, even if he was ranked as a consensus tight end one, he's like a third round pick, fourth round pick, usually the third. And just last year, people were drafting him late first round. What people are forgetting when it comes to Travis Kelce is that he opened the year with a lower body injury, and I don't think he was ever healthy. When he looked like himself, he had the week 18. I think they rested him. Then he goes into the playoffs, and all of a sudden he looks like elite Travis Kelce again. I think that week off really helped. And despite it all, Travis Kelce, I'm pulling it up right now. I believe he was still, yes, the tight end one in fantasy points per game and the tight end three overall. So on a points per game basis, which to me is more valuable, he is still the tight end one. And now his situation in Kansas City, Rice, Worthy, and Hollywood Brown, two of those speedsters, they're going to bring the defense downfield. If you're the enemy defense, what are you going to do? Are you going to let one of those speedy wide receivers take the top off you for a big play, or are you going to follow them and leave the middle of the field open for Travis Kelce? He's going to have a lot more layups in the middle of the field. So I'm backing Travis Kelce to bounce back. And then, of course, Mark Andrews, there's the injury concerns. But when he is there, he is the number one target in that offense. I know Zay Jones had quite a few targets, nice target share last year. But when they're both on the field, I believe Mark Andrews still edges him out. And where he really edges out Zay Flowers, I think I might have said Zay Jones a few minutes ago, where he really edges out Zay Flowers is in the red zone. Last year, Mark Andrews, despite only playing in 10 games, he had the sixth most red zone targets at the tight end position. He had 14, caught 10. So he had the sixth most at the position and only played in 10 games. When he's on the field, he's the guy in the red zone for this offense. It's just, if you want to ding him for injuries, that's fine. But then we kind of have to start dinging everybody for injuries because everybody kind of gets hurt.
Yeah. I'm kind of in agreement in terms of like I see what you see with these two guys. My tier is slightly different. I have pull it back up. I have Kelce, and then
one second here. Can I before you go? For everybody who loves Sam Laporta had, and he played in 17 games. He only had 2 more red zone targets from Mark Andrews. Do the math. And it's like, who's the better value?
Well, and what red zone targets do they really have there? I mean, David Montgomery is a red zone rusher,
if
but
you say that, then we have to be fair and say they brought in Montgomery. So if we're going
to, no, but I'm saying he should have more. You would think
more.
You would think he'd have more. That's my point.
I just wanted to end my Andrews. Why do I have him over Laporta? That's the reason why.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. All right, so. By the way, as we're kind of going along here, guys, if you want to provide some of your opinions on our rankings, feel free to shoot us yours in the comments below. I have Mark Andrews. So if we were going to do 4 tiers, Mark Andrews would be in my tier 2 with Sam Laporta, which is kind of a little bit of a I guess a highlight to the next set of tiers. But I have Trey McBride in there with Travis Kelce. To Anthony's point, I won't touch on Kelce too much since Anthony kind of did most of the heavy lifting, but 32 receptions for 355 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's what he did in the playoffs last year. Like, that was elite Travis Kelce. That's the guy that we're used to seeing. And to Anthony's point, like, He was clearly banged up last season, and the postseason showed me everything that I needed to see from Travis Kelce. His legs were still there, and this is a guy that was injured all year. He got that extra week off, looked refreshed, looked ready to go, and he just changes into a different guy down the stretch of the year when it comes to just playing and providing elite finishes. And I think that the players that they added are field stretchers, and it's going to help this offense and help him. Look, Travis Kelce probably isn't going to be a downfield threat nearly as much as we are used to seeing in the past, but like he's going to work that underneath. And look, Patrick Mahomes was like 20 in the 20 to 25 range in terms of like average depth of throws. Like he was throwing the ball short a lot last year. These weapons will provide him the ability to throw deep, but he's also proven to us that he can take the checkdowns. He can take the easy throws, and Kelce should be able to feast in the middle of the field and on short passes with those field stretchers that they added. So that'll close out Kelce for me. Trey McBride is in this tier for me as well. Some stats about Trey McBride, he was second behind George Kittle in yards per route run last year. Yards per route run is a nice indicator for fantasy success. When it comes to look at a guy like George Kittle, he's always a top fantasy finisher, but he never has that volume, and that's what we worry about. McBride, but the reason that Kittle produces is he's got a lot of yards after catch, and he has a lot of deeper throws, and he scores touchdowns. McBride is kind of similar in this regard. Since 2021, only two tight ends with at least 50 targets posted at 27% targets per route run. So he was targeted 27% on all routes that he ran, which is significant. TJ Hawkinson was number 2, and he also had over 2.0 yards per route run, which is what we talked about, and he was second behind George Kittle. FF Stallion on Twitter, who's one of our guys here, shared that with me earlier today. But I think with McBride, he doesn't have to have that insane volume to be good for fantasy. Those yards per route run and those yards per target mean that he is going to get, more passes down the field. He only had 3 touchdowns last season, right? I expect that number to go up this year with better quarterback play. This isn't a guy like Sam Laporta who came off 10 touchdowns last year, and we're projecting him to be possibly the fantasy tight end 1, which a lot of guys out there are. We see a regression there. Trey McBride did what he did on only 3 touchdowns last year. Now you might say, well, Pete, they had no other options, like Marquise Brown, Greg Dortch, Rondell Moore, but while I understand that the options weren't there, the quarterback play wasn't that great either. You bring in Marvin Harrison Jr., he's going to stretch the field, similar to our point with Travis Kelce, and McBride should be able to eat in the middle of the field as well. I'm really excited to see Trey McBride in year 3. And he may lose some catches and some targets, but he should go up in terms of the touchdowns that he scores. I don't think this is a guy that's going to score 3 touchdowns again. There's just no way. So I don't know if Anthony had anything else to talk about in terms of Trey McBride, but I know McBride's in the next tier for Anthony, so we can just talk about him once we get there. Anything in the chat here? I know there's a couple comments here. It seems like a lot of guys are high on Kincaid in here. We got Frankie Knuckles, Zach Linton is talking about Kincaid as well, and we'll let you guys duke it out in the comments. If you have any questions, let us know. But yeah, tier 2. I'll let Anthony
Frankie,
go over his first.
We'll get into the Bowers possibly later. But yeah, let's go into my tier 2 players here. And we're going to start with Dalton Kincaid, where I have him ranked ahead of Trey McBride. I like Dalton Kincaid a lot. He's ranked as my tight end 4. I don't need to go back into Laporta. But the ones I really want to focus right now is Kincaid over McBride.
And Anthony, before you get into it, since we have people that are listening and they can't see, can you just tell the listeners who you have in this tier?
Yeah, I'll go over it so we have Kelce, Andrews, Laporta, and Laporta starts my tier 2. Kincaid, McBride, Pitts, then George Kittle, and let me pull him up because I don't know.
And Evan Ingram. I got you.
Evan, yeah. So the difference, and I like McBride. I like McBride until the Arizona Cardinals. They brought in Marvin Harrison Jr. They recently brought in Zay Jones. And these and they Michael Wilson, who I love going into year two. They have a better group of pass catchers than people think, and possibly the most talented in the Kyler Murray era. McBride did a lot of his damage, right? Two of his best games came when Hollywood Brown was either out or banged up. If we look at those two games, McBride pops in weeks 13 and 15. Marquise Brown was limited to 0 catches, 3 targets in week 13 against Pittsburgh. He only played 34 snaps. And week 15 against the 49ers, 23 snaps, did not see a target and only ran 12 routes. So it's like when McBride was the only target most of the time, of course, he was super productive. If we go back early in the season, week 8 against Baltimore, McBride was a tight end 1 on a week. Yes, Hollywood played. But like later in the year, this was a really drained out wide receiver room, and McBride was it. That's not going to be the case this year, barring injury. So I just question the Trey McBride volume now that we have a wide receiver room where you have Marvin Harrison, arguably the best wide receiver in this draft class. Michael Wilson going into year 2, who had a nice finish this season. They bring in Zay Jones. They have Greg Dortch. When it comes to Dalton Kincaid, the situation's much different because they have a wide receiver room. They don't have an alpha, right? Like, we don't know what Keon Coleman is. Shakir, to me, might be the best of this group. Curtis Samuel is a journeyman. He's just a guy. They brought in MVS. They brought in Mac Hollins. There's a realistic case to be made that Dalton Kincaid could lead this team in targets. And when you can make a case for a player like that, look at other players in the past, like Mark Andrews, when he led the Ravens in targets. And that was with, Lamar Jackson. Now you have a much better passer of the football in Josh Allen. I get that they brought back Dawson Knox. Kincaid's a superior pass catcher and route runner. Knox is a better blocker. So, like, when it's all said and done here, I think there's a true case to be made that Kincaid leads the Bills in targets. If not, at worst, he's number 2 in targets on this football team. Last year's rookie year, 73 from 91, 673 and 2, just under 10 fantasy points per game. I don't know, Pete. Like, for me, and he's versatile. He was number 2 amongst tight ends in lining up in the slot. So, like, there's a lot of positive here for me to be taking and ranking Kincaid over McBride. Better quarterback and better situation, because there is nothing close to a Marvin Harris in this wide receiver room.
So one pushback I'll give you on both guys with Trey and Kincaid. Keep in mind that Zach Ertz was a part of this football team for the Cardinals last year. Zach Ertz had 2 games where he had 10 targets. He had 43 targets. He was averaging 6 targets per game in 7 games that he played. So, like, once Zach Ertz was out of the picture, Trey McBride had the ability to step on the field and be successful. And McBride still finished as the tight end 7 in fantasy point in overall in PPR 7, and that's with Zach Ertz being the starting tight end for 7 weeks, where he saw 43 targets. So that's the only pushback I'll give on McBride, but I can totally understand your hesitation. I don't have an issue having Andrews ahead of him like you do. The thing I'll say about Kincaid, and we've talked about this with Dawson Knox, and I think that there's a good chance they're going to both be on the field. I think we can say that. Knox will probably be the inline guy. Kincaid will line up in the big slot a lot. I think that's going to happen. But what I would say is their splits, like with Knox on the field, with Knox on the field playing, Kincaid only saw, I think it was 10 points per game. And then without Knox, he was 14.1 points per game, which would be
Right.
tied for third with Sam Laporta. So, like, I know Dawson Knox isn't sexy, but like prior to like not counting last season in 2021 and 2022, like Knox had 17 red zone targets with both of those, which ranks second among tight ends, I believe, in the NFL. So, something to that effect. I think 9.8 expected touchdowns, which was sixth in the NFL. So, like, this is a guy that Josh Allen definitely likes. But to
Yeah.
Anthony's point, Kincaid has a chance to be the number one receiver,
Yeah. And
like point blank, period. Like that, which is there's value in that.
and where McBride, he is inheriting Marvin Harrison Jr. And Scott is Zay Jones. Zay Jones is a playmaker. He's gonna make some plays. And when you look at Buffalo, Stephon Diggs had 160 targets. Those are all now vacated
Mhm.
targets. They're not. They're obviously. I'm not saying Kincaid's getting 160 targets, but they're going somewhere.
Hey, we saw Evan Ingram have like
Yeah.
120 last year.
Before you go, I just wanted to touch on one more player in this
Yeah.
tier for me, and that's Kyle Pitts. I'm all in on Kyle Pitts this year. If anybody who's listened to me through the years, I never had a lot of them. When I don't have a lot of a player and they're super talented, it's not about talent, it's situation. The situation's vastly different with Zach Robinson and Kirk Cousins now. At quarterback and offensive coordinator. Kyle Pitts, it's not like he's never flashed. His rookie year, over 1,000 yards receiving in his rookie season. Laporta, I think he had right around 800 or just over 900 to put things in perspective. And Pitts managed to do that with Marcus Mariota. I think this is the year that Kyle Pitts finally cashes in for his fantasy managers. It's just the situation can't be better when you finally get a dream offensive coordinator and Kirk Cousins, one of the more accurate passers in the current NFL. Uh, there's also reports and rumors that they're going to line up Kyle Pitts at wide receiver. So there's just a lot of positives here, which is why I have Pitts ahead of George Kittle and Evan Ingram.
Yeah, so I'm right there with you. Evan Ingram isn't even in this tier for me. I know he's in this tier for you. Kyle Pitts, my analysis literally just buying into the hype. I never was a big believer in Pitts. I believed in him, but I was
Yeah.
never as high on him as some other people were. And Kirk Cousins targeted the tight end position fifth most in the
Yes.
NFL last year.
Yes.
So I think we can agree on that. And so my tier here, and for those that you can't see, the difference between tiers is I have Laporta, Kincaid, Mark Andrews is in tier 2 for me. He's in tier 1 for Anthony, and I had McBride in tier 1. Andrews ended up being in tier 1 for Anthony. The rest of my tier 2, I have Kyle Pitts and Kittle, which me, Anthony, all have the same 4. The only difference is I have Jake Ferguson and Anthony has Evan Ingram in his tier. So I'm going to talk Jake Ferguson, and I also want to talk about Mark Andrews, and then we'll move on. Those are the only two guys I'll talk about here. I didn't get a chance to talk about Mark Andrews. Anthony loves him. He's in his tier 1, obviously. I love Mark Andrews too. I think the addition of Derrick Henry can help him out, which is a crazy thing to say because Derrick Henry, you figure he's going to steal a lot of touchdowns. Vegas has him projected at 10.5 touchdowns this year. Gus Edwards scored 13 touchdowns in this offense last year. But I think teams are going to be worried about Lamar and Derrick Henry at the goal line so much that Mark Andrews becomes like almost the third option for teams to worry about, right? And he's also going to be the
That's
first
insane
option.
to think.
And he's going to be the first passing option. Like I know there was reports today about Rashad Bateman and Harbaugh came out and said we think he could be the best, one of the best
Yeah.
wide receivers in the NFL. I don't care the Rashad Bateman. If I'm wrong about him, great. Like pat on the back for those that stayed on the Rashad Bateman train. I ain't getting back on. I never really was on.
Yep.
But Mark Andrews was third in yards per route run last year, and he was ninth in targets per route run. for tight ends. He led the team with a 27.4% target share. He had 43% of the targets for the team when he was healthy and on the field. 43 of the red zone targets, 43% went to Mark Andrews. That is insane. 43% of the red zone targets. 12.3 snaps he played in line, which is great if you like that was the lowest of all the tight ends that are ranked in the top 30 for fantasy. Mark Andrews played the least amount of snaps in line, which is awesome because that means he's running routes. He was 5th in fantasy points per game last year. The team added 0 red zone weapons. They have no real pass catchers in the red zone that I can think of, other than Devontae Walker, who has stone hands, rookie, but maybe he'll get better. But he was also 4th in red zone targets last year in the entire NFL. No, I'm sorry, red zone targets for the tight end position. And I just love his cost. I mean, Mark Andrews is going in like the 5th round of fantasy drafts this year. 4th to 5th round turn is insane value for Mark Andrews. So I'm in love with him. It was hard keeping him out. Like I said, if we did 4 tiers, it would be Andrews and Laporta in my tier 2. But he does get lumped into my tier 2, which is majority. We have 6 guys each in our tier 2s. The second guy that I wanted to talk about, and then we'll move on to tier 3, is Jake Ferguson, right? I know Frankie Knuckles asked if we were going to talk about Jake Ferguson. Will said he's big on Ferg as well. I am too. Jake Ferguson, when you look at last season, CeeDee Lamb was number 1 in the NFL for red zone targets. Number 2 was Jake Ferguson. Yep. Not number 2 on the team. Number 2 in the NFL.
Number 1 at tight end.
Number 1 at tight end. Number 2 in the NFL. Like, that is insane when you think about the fact that they play on the same team. Like, you don't have to worry about CeeDee Lamb. I'm not worried. Brandon Cooks is a good NFL player. I mean, I'm not in love with Brandon Cooks unless I'm playing best ball and I'm stacking that offense. But, like, other than that, like, this offense, they do have Zeke now, right, who provides some rushing upside. But Dallas was still running the football in the red zone. They just weren't getting in.
Not effectively.
Not effectively, right? So we could see that some regression there in terms of targets for the both of them. If there was anyone that's going to lose some, it's probably Ferguson over Lamb. But this is a high-powered offense, and he has a shot to be the number 2 pass option in this offense. Yeah. I know Brandon Cooks is a veteran, and he's still a good player, but Ferguson could be number 2 on this offense for targets this season. And I want pieces in one of the best offenses in the NFL. Like last year, this offense was moving. They could not be stopped until they ran into the Packers, who, I mean, I don't want to talk about that because I know Anthony's a Cowboys fan. Yeah, you get it. So I love Jake Ferguson. I think he's got huge upside. I think he has top 5 finish upside as well. And I think if I had him ranked, Ferguson lands at like my tight end 5 or 6 this season. I am extremely bullish on Jake Ferguson this year.
Yeah, and Ferguson is the first player in my next tier. We don't have to go too deep into it. But like you said, all the right things. The only reason why I don't have him in this tier and I have Evan Ingram ahead is because we have 2 straight years of Evan Ingram being hyper targeted in the Jaguars offense. The reason why he was overly targeted last year was because of the Christian Kirk injury. But even 2 years ago, when Kirk was healthy, Evan Ingram was a big part of this offense. And I just don't, and they brought in Brian Thomas, they bring in Gabe Davis. I still see a world where Ingram is first, or not first, if Kirk's healthy, but I see a world where Ingram is still number 2 on this team in targets. And I like what you said here about Ferguson, by the way. Somebody in the chat earlier said, hey, he could be a top 5 guy. I truly believe he could be a top 5 tight end. There is a path to it. I think it's a long shot, but like, I think Dallas didn't bring in much. Like Brandon Cooks is nice. He's an over the top weapon. There is a world, like you said, where Ferguson is number 2 on this team in targets. And I was trying to pull it up. He might have been close to number 2 last year. I just don't have the target share.
I don't have this share either.
He might have been number 2 last year. I just don't know what Cook's got. But Let me see if I can pull that up. I usually have team targets, and I
Yeah,
don't.
why don't
Cooks had 81, so Ferg, I think he was number two.
I think he was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dak is playing for a contract this year.
Yep.
So, yeah. Um, okay, so we have two questions here. We have one more tier to get to. Why don't we answer these two questions? Frankie Knuckles, Bowers, we're going to talk about him in the next tier.
I'm not.
Will is here, and he said, which Kansas City receiver would you go for in best ball? No point in drafting Rashid Rice? Question mark. Go for Hollywood or Worthy? Hollywood over Worthy? Question mark. I guess the main point is he wants to know who would you take in best ball if you were drafting one of the three. I would add cost in there too, but Anthony, why don't you answer this one?
Listen, I'm drafting Rice. As we get closer to the season, and we don't hear anything about an off the field resolution, it makes it hard for me to buy into there's going to be an NFL resolution. Number one, before there's anything off the field, and I believe the court date is until when? December.
Yeah,
And if it's
the
not
civil
until
case,
yeah, if
and
it's not until December,
the
they're gonna
NFL already said they're not going to be stepping in. They're going to let the
right.
process work out.
So that needs to resolve, I
Yeah.
believe, until the NFL does something. So we might be looking at an Alvin Kamara like thing from 2 years ago, where it doesn't get it resolved until a year later. And before, like the start of the offseason, Rice was a late second, early third round pick. His ADP fell to in the 90s. Now it's readjusting. But as Rice's ADP is coming back up, we are seeing Worthy and Hollywood Brown's ADP drop. So I would get by the market on Rashid Rice right now.
Yeah, his ADP is actually going back up.
Yeah,
We
but he's
do
still a
a
fucking discount compared to where it was
yeah.
in April.
Yeah, he was wide in the 2 to 3 turn
Yeah,
around the DJ Moores, the DK
yeah.
Metcalfs, uh and we do a weekly Wednesday show if you guys haven't tuned in. We talk about stock watch, ADP watch of where guys are moving up and down. Rice is somebody we've been talking about almost it feels
Yeah.
like every week.
Yep.
Rice is getting drafted I think in the 60 range now. He was in the 70s. He fell as low as like in the 80s, which was just insane. But to Anthony's point, like in best ball, like if this guy gets suspended, say it's early, if he doesn't get suspended early in the season, I don't think he's getting suspended at all this season.
Yeah.
They're going to push it to next year. And even if he does get suspended early in the season for best ball, like that doesn't affect you too much because you want Rice for the end of the season and your team's going to be the most healthy that it's going to be in the beginning of the season. So you can live with not getting
Yeah.
Rice in the first few games of the year if that was to happen.
From June 1st to today, using FFPC ADP, Rice has jumped up 15 spots.
Yeah.
So he went from 89.8, he's at 74.5, and that's using Fantasy Pros Championship ADP at the FFPC.
Yeah. All right. One more thing here, and then we'll get to one more question. Well, more of a comment. Coach Farrell, what's up, man? He said, "What's up, guys? Football is here, baby. How well does Williams and a Dunze connection work out in Chicago as true rookies? I've heard someone say the amount of rookies you start equals 2 losses on the schedule." Look, I think there's a world where where Roma Dunze can be fantasy relevant this season. Keenan Allen is not young, and Dawson Knox. I'm sorry, Cole Kmet is not a target hog, but they did add DeAndre Swift, who's a good pass catcher. We just heard the offensive coordinator come out, Shane Waldron, and talk about the ability for Swift to catch the ball out of the backfield and run routes. So there's going to be targets to him. There's more mouths to feed on the offense. Romo Dunze, while I really like him, it's probably going to take an injury to the position for him to be successful. But the other caveat I'd say is this defense isn't that good. They're probably a middle of the pack to bottom third defense in the league, and so they could be in a lot of shootouts. They play with two very high-powered offenses in the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers on their schedule. That's 4 games in division that are going to be tough. Now, granted, those are outdoors and the weather and all that's a factor, except with the Lions, but 2 will be outdoors minimum, or 3. But Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not really high on Adunze this year. I'm not going to lie to you. I know Anthony isn't high on Keenan Allen, so maybe he has a different take. But I'm probably avoiding Adunze. But if I was going to draft one guy in this group, it's Caleb Williams.
Yeah. And what's going on, Tommy? The whole Bears offense, right? It's a question mark. When you look at Shane Waldron uh, in Seattle as OC, they didn't throw a ton. I'm pulling up the team pass plays or the team attempts per game, usually in the middle to the back end. Now, Caleb Williams, I'm buying a little bit more into him as his price point dips a little bit. The issue when it comes to Roma Dunze, I like him more in Dynasty. Keenan Allen's going to probably be one and done anyway. We're going to be looking at a wide receiver starting room and two wide sets in 2025 with Dunze and DJ Moore, which is fine. But this year, the only path I see to Roma Dunze being significantly fantasy relevant is if Keenan Allen misses time. And he could. The age and wear and tear starting to keep up with him. I'm more into drafting Caleb than I am Roma Dunze in redraft. But if you're in a dynasty league, I certainly want to get my hands on a Dunze because I think he's going to be a terrific player moving forward. I just think that we have Keenan Allen standing in his way in the immediate future. So he's more of an injury dependent guy. And last year, Shane Waldron's offense in Seattle, they were also three deep at wide receiver with Lockett, JSN, and DK Metcalf. And they're, JSN just didn't come through in fantasy the way we thought he should have been. A lot of it was because of Tyler Lockett standing in his way. So I just see a very similar scenario with Chicago. And also, how much are they going to throw the ball? Is this defense going to take a step forward? They're 2 to 3 deep at the running back position. Do you want to throw Caleb into the fire and have him as a top 12 quarterback and pass plays per game? So there's just a lot of factors of why I'm kind of I don't want to say I'm steering clear, but I'm treading the water when it comes to this Bears offense. Outside of
Yeah.
DJ Moore, I love DJ Moore. What DJ Moore did last year with Justin Fields, he should be able to replicate that if we believe Caleb is a better passer of the football. And I believe that he is over Justin Fields. So outside of Fields, I don't really want a ton of the offensive assets in Chicago.
Yeah. It's funny. I have a buddy of mine that I played college football with, and his name is Josh Farrell, and he was a coach, and his Twitter name is Coach Farrell. So I was giving a double take here because I didn't know if that was my buddy. He coached at Kutztown for defensive backs. Um, cool. All right. So we don't have any more questions. So let's move on. If anybody has any other comments, questions, we're getting to the end of the show here. We're going to go over our last tier. Any other questions, feel free to reach out to us or DM us. We're going to be opening up a email as well for you guys to send in like a mailbox of questions, just in case you can't make the show. We have a lot of guys. I know we have a lot of people that listen to the show on the podcast platform. They're not able to make the live shows. We want to open up a forum for you guys to be able to, come with your questions if you can't make the show. So we're going to be opening that up in the next week or so with more details on that. But coming into our tier 3 here, I'm going to just read it off, and then Anthony's going to go over his. I'm going to read off what we have in both. So Anthony has Jake Ferguson, who is in my tier 2. Jake Ferguson, Dallas Goedert, Pat Freiermuth, and David Njoku. I have David Njoku, Goddard. So we both have those two in tier 3. But I have Cole Kmet, and then I have Evan Ingram, who was in Anthony's tier 2. I have Evan Ingram in my tier 3. The one caveat here is I have Cole Kmet, who is not on Anthony's list at all, and Anthony has Pat Freiermuth, who was not on my list at all. So I'll have Anthony go over, a little bit, probably more target Freiermuth, Anthony, if you're cool with that. And then if there's any other guy you want to speak about, we'll jump into it.
Really, it's just Freiermuth here. And I'm buying into the fact that this Pittsburgh Steelers pass catching group, there's not a lot there, right? I love George Pickens, and this is going to be an offense that doesn't throw a lot, right? It's Arthur Smith. We know what he's going to bring to the table. That's why I'm all in on Najee Harris. But So who's the number 2 in this offense receiver wise? Unless they bring in somebody, there's a path for Pat Fryermuth to be that guy. And under Arthur Smith, the tight end, I know Pitts didn't deliver in fantasy, but he was still targeted. The targets were not really catchable when it comes to catchable target rate. Russell Wilson is still a very good thrower. And if he is looking for an option not named George Pickens, I think it's going to be Pat Fryermuth. Now, Fryermuth never really delivered in a big way in fantasy, but this is another guy that suffered from atrocious quarterback play. Whether it is Fields, whether it's Russ, and I believe it's going to be Russ all year, both of those guys are drastic upgrades from any quarterback that played for the Pittsburgh Steelers since Big Ben. So, not a lot on Fryermuth. It's just I'm buying into the quarterback upgrade. Like, that changes my mind a lot. When you go from bad quarterback to an average to above average or good quarterback, I'm probably going to buy into his pass catchers. And before you go, Pete, I don't have Brock Bowers on here. I'm low on Brock Bowers. And we've talked about Bowers on quite a few shows. You can go, there's a 10-minute video clip that we posted of why I'm out on Brock Bowers. There's a lot of guys, and I'll just go through it real quick. Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, they're both target vacuums, obviously more so Devontae. Run first offense. This defense is going to be good under Pierce. But how do we factor in Brock Bowers giving us north of 10 PPR points a game, which is where I would want him to be if he's in my top 12, when last year in games played with Aiden O'Connell, Devontae Adams averaged 9.4 fantasy points per game? Do we really believe that Gardner Minshew is that much better than Aiden O'Connell? And if the answer is no, then if Devontae is not getting 10 fantasy points per game with O'Connell, and this is a guy who was targeted like 170 times, then why are we drafting Brock Bowers as a top 12 tight end? Take your blinders off of what Laporta and Kincaid did last year. Like Kincaid had Josh Allen, Laporta, very good OC, very good quarterback. That is not the case for Brock Bowers.
Yeah, so I'm not as low on Bowers as Anthony, and Anthony has been adamant on this take, and that's totally fine. Yeah, hey, look, I respect that. I'd rather somebody be behind a take than not. I had Cole Kmet in here, and Anthony had Fryermuth. Look, this is kind of a pick your poison to end this tier for a top 12. That we wanted to keep it to 12 because in 12-man leagues, right, there's 12 guys that can finish as a tight end one. I have Cole Kmet in here just because he's a guy that's found the end zone the last 2 seasons, 6 touchdowns last year, 7 touchdowns the year before, finished it as the 9th in fantasy points per game. They do add some better competition, but Justin Fields just wasn't a great quarterback. I just feel like there are more targets, but I don't think they added really a red zone threat. I mean, Keenan Allen, he can score in the red zone, but he's not a big red zone threat. DJ Moore is not a huge red zone threat. These are guys that score, touchdowns outside the goal line. And Cole Kmet's a guy that really wasn't affected in that standpoint. They didn't really add a big body back. There was talks about Josh Jacobs, a bigger, maybe a Saquon Barkley. DeAndre Swift, I don't think he's going to be the goal line back. I think it's Roshan Johnson or Khalil Herbert, which is why I'm low on DeAndre Swift. But I do think Cole Kmet's going to be a guy that's looked at the goal line, and I think he's going to score touchdowns. I think this offense is just going to be better. They have a really bad defense, which is what I talked about before. I think they're going to be in a lot of high-scoring games, and I think Kmet's going to be a benefactor for that. I think if I had to guess, they're going to be in some games where the offense has to score 30 points. I wouldn't be so shocked if this offense scores 30 points a couple times this year, and if they do, I think Cole Kmet can be a beneficiary. They have good targets on the outside, but when it comes to Odunze or Kmet, I think there's a good chance that Kmet catches more passes than Odunze this year. And if that is the case, I mean, he caught 73 last year. If he's catching 73 passes in a better offense from a better quarterback like he did last year, this is a guy that can finish in the top 12. I don't know if he does catch that many because there's more, Keenan Allen and DJ Moore are target hogs, but I do think there's a chance that those touchdowns go up because they're gonna move the ball and be in the red zone more. And that's just kind of how I feel. I don't have a strong feeling on Cole Kmet. I didn't feel great putting him in this spot. It was between him and Brock Bowers for me. I do like Freiermuth, to Anthony's point. I've just been burned by him too much, and I try not to have that cloud my judgment, but I just can't get behind that Steelers offense outside of George Pickens and Najee Harris. Those are really only the two guys that I really want to own in that offense. But Cole Kmet lands here at the end of my tier 3. And it's really interchangeable between him and Brock Bowers for me. I know Anthony is not huge on Brock Bowers. I do think, regardless of everything Anthony shared, I think Bowers still has a chance to be in that, in that low tight end 12 to tight end 14 range is probably where he finishes at the worst, in my opinion. But to Anthony's point, Michael Mayer is still there. The team did invest capital into him, and he was one of the more sought after tight ends in Dynasty last year, and people were very excited about him. And to Anthony's point, we don't normally see tight ends explode like we did last year. Like, tight end is one of the hardest positions to develop in the NFL. You got to learn how to block. You pretty much got to play 2 positions. You got to learn how to block. You got to understand the blocking schemes. You got to understand all of what an offensive lineman knows and has to learn, plus be a tight end and understand zones and where to sit and how to push the zones and all those types of things. And so we might not see Bowers blow up on the scene like some think is going to happen. And not for nothing, a lot of those tight ends that blew up last year had better quarterback play as rookies. Sam Laporta had Jared Goff, who's not a slouch. So to end the long-winded rant, I think I'm talking a lot to steer away from people remembering that I did pick Cole Kmet to finish as a tight end 1. I'm not excited about it. I'm trying to talk myself into it. I don't feel good about it. I kind of feel gross and think I need to take a shower after this. But yeah, that's really all I got. I don't have a lot to say about Cole Kmet. That's it's just vibes, baby. Just vibes.
The only thing I have to say about all of that is I think the Bears defense is going to be better than people think with Eberflus and a lot of the guys they brought in. But it has nothing to do with the tight end. It's just I think this Bears defense is going to be pretty good. But this was a little bit of a long show, but an awesome show. We see, the viewer count, awesome number of live viewers in here, awesome amount of questions, and this is what we want. As we enter, we're really going to be entering NFL training camp, the heart of fantasy draft season. I'm going to be doing a lot of high stakes drafts. I do a lot of best ball and stuff, but like I start doing my more serious money drafts starting at the end of this month into August. Obviously, Steve D'Angelo will be back soon. He's a ridiculous. He loves the high stakes drafts. He'll go on and do these 2-hour shows separate from us, but we have a lot of stuff coming. If you ever want to see like independent clips from our longer shows, the morning after, I'm always clipping things. Pete's making a thumbnail, so just go in our archives and check them out. But this was another awesome show here. We'll be back Wednesday with our weekly ADP Market Mover show. My favorite show of the week, so cannot wait for that. But for Pete and myself, this is the Face Off Sports Network. If you want to win, you have to tune in. We'll see you next time. As I look for my outro button.